Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout. I was really looking forward to this, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a huge fan of shows like Takeshi's Castle, MXC, Wipeout, Ninja Warrior, you get the general idea, right? So, someone finally decided to turn it into a game that's actually relatively playable, but there's a few problems with it. So let me just take the opportunity to describe the basic gist of it. You're what they call a fall guy, and you're pretty heavily affected by physics. You can go sliding around the place, you can grab onto other people, but it's not massively effective. You can't like hold someone back the entire time, for example. And you can jump and you can dive. And the general idea is that you've got a bunch of games to go through, whether they be races, team sports, general survival mini-games, and if you manage to survive enough rounds, you'll get to the final challenge. And if you win the final challenge, you win the game. Well, that's pretty simple. Most of these matches don't go longer than 15 minutes. I've got like a 35-minute video here, and I go through three full, not full matches, but I get pretty close to the end each time, so yeah. They're relatively short. The overall reward is in both, I believe, fame, which is what they use for their season pass stuff, and for the currency you can use to buy extra, like, clothing. Although most people are running around with, I think it's the stuff that you get from the pre-order bonus. They gave you like a deluxe pack of clothes and like enough money to buy a fair few bits of clothing. So, that's a thing. So, what don't I like about it? Well, I'll talk about the more minor things first, things that they're probably going to fix in the future. The main thing, well not the main thing, but the first thing that comes to mind immediately is the repetitiveness. I've played about 5 or 6 games of this. I played for about 90 minutes, if I'm being honest. After that, I thought to myself, I don't really want to keep playing this anymore, and I won't be able to get a refund on Steam if I choose not to. And I had seen all the games that there were to be seen, as far as I could tell. I started getting repeats immediately. Like, I had a second game that was almost identical to my first game, and it was kind of unusual in the sense that the mini games that got picked out randomly were the same ones. And it was kind of silly, if I'm being honest with you, because you can do so much with this concept. Even MXC had a fair few more games than this to start out with. Sure, they brought back like sinkers and floaters and all the really popular ones a lot, right? But that doesn't really mean that they couldn't have put a little bit more effort into putting more games in. There's about 16, and they're spread into the categories that I mentioned earlier. You've got the races, which are just going from one end of this course to another before everyone else. You've got the team sports, which are arguably the most interesting of all. They're the most varied, they have the most interesting mechanics to them. You've got survival, which involves things like avoiding walls on a platform, or looking at the ground, seeing some tiles to memorize, and standing on the right one when they flash one up, although that one is extremely easy to win, because, as it turns out, a group of 30 people or so usually have some pretty decent memory. And then you've got the final challenge, of which there's only 2 right now, one of which is basically a race, and the second one, which is just running on top of a bunch of hexagons that disappear under you and hoping that you don't get screwed over by everyone else's movements. But yes, there's only 16 of them, and you play it up to 5 in one round. So you will eventually not only see everything, you will see it relatively quickly if you play more than a few matches. And the problem with this is that they make no effort to add any sort of variability to the courses. The only thing that really changes is the way other people act, and especially with some of the team sports, like, it's super simple to add, like, more arenas to the JINXED one, for example, where it's basically just everyone's running around trying to tag each other. You could easily add, like, 3 or 4 variations to this. For the race courses, you could easily, like, at the very least, change the order of the obstacles so that you could have it like you could have just slightly different orders to give you just that little bit of extra variety. The races especially, considering how relatively easy they are, the only way you're going to get screwed over is if the physics decides to screw you over in one way or another, and trust me, we'll get to that. But yes, it just seems that there's just zero variety to it, and after you see the same things more than a couple of times, you'll be wondering if there's anything really new to it. There isn't. The only reason why I put this as a minor gripe is because they're working this game on a sort of season system where they'll probably add more minigames as time goes on. But still, I think what they launched with is a bit too little, especially when for at least some of these, it can be relatively easy in order to change it up a little bit, in order to make it more interesting, and I don't know why they didn't do that. My second problem is the fact that the game's got a season pass system. So yeah, you've got, well, you don't actually have to buy a season pass as far as I can tell. They're only selling, like, in-game currency to buy more cosmetics and, like, separate DLC packs that, again, have cosmetics. So, I find myself thinking, is this really the way that I would go about it in this sort of game? I don't think it would be. I just find it to be a bit dull, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, and it's not really helped out by the fact that it does the thing where there's only a limited amount of goods to buy in terms of like customizations, and it refreshes every like 12 or 24 hours. I didn't bother to look into it in depth, and I just think to myself, I don't like this. I've never liked this system, and in a game like this, I don't see the point. I don't enjoy systems that arbitrarily lock me out of buying what I want and make me come back every 12 to 24 hours to see if there's something that I would actually like. And yeah, I just find it distasteful. And I'm not a fan of it in this game. Especially since you can already buy like real world DLC packs for it and all that. So yeah, I don't like it. It puts a bad taste in my mouth. The big problem, though, the absolutely massive problem with this game is the physics. Now, when you're talking about a game that's inspired by the likes of Wipeout and MXC and what have you, you think to yourself, okay, you're gonna need physics in order to make this more fun. That makes more sense. But my first problem is that the physics just aren't particularly funny to look at. Sure, you'll get knocked over every now and again, but it's not in a really enjoyable way, because all of their limbs are really short, and you need to be able to get back up really fast in order for the game not to turn into get knocked over once and you basically lose, right? But in this game, with all their limbs being so short, especially the legs, it's just like you get knocked over and it just kind of looks like a jelly bean falling over, and then you get back up again. And that's it. There's nothing particularly funny. There's like no instant replays for particularly painful looking failures. There's nothing along those lines at all. And they claim for it to be a bit more comedic, but I just find it to be a bit more frustrating than anything else. Because it just means when you get knocked over, it's not particularly funny. It's just you have to wait for this jelly bean on legs to get back up again. It's just not satisfying in the same way that a full-on knockover like in MXC or in Wipeout would be. You don't get any really dramatic splashes. You don't get any sort of like an arm bouncing off an obstacle and sending the guy spinning. You don't get anything like that. It's just, again, a fat jelly bean falling over and over again. My second problem with the physics is that they're way too sensitive. Now, you would expect it to be sensitive when you've got all these different obstacles going around that can send you flying and what have you. But there are a couple of parts where it goes way too far. There's a couple of minigames that are a great example of this. One is the minigame where you have to run over this pit, and there's a bunch of like squares on the ground. And some of the squares are fake, so it's basically like a re-implementation of sinkers and floaters. So you have to find your way across. But due to the way the physics work, as you walk over the individual gaps between the squares, you have like a 25% chance of tripping over and falling flat on your face or being thrown off onto another square, at which point you're probably just going to fall straight off the edge. This happens a lot. This happens way more than it has any right to, and I think it has something to do with the netcode, but I'm legitimately not sure. Because I have really good internet. I have like the best internet you could possibly expect, right? Like, I have the best internet you can get in Australia. There is no way that this internet would be bad for this kind of game. So, I don't know if it's bad internet or the servers being just terrible at it, but sometimes the physics in this game just fucking suck for that. When you just go over a small line in the ground and you trip over and you think to yourself, what the fuck was that? And it's not just that one game. There are just like courses where there are little steps that are just a little bit taller than the rest that you'll just flat out trip over and it'll be like, nope, you lose, fuck you. The physics, however, can also come back to bite you in a lot of different ways. There are times where you'll get sent flying across the map, right? For example, there's this one course where there are these huge spinning like rods on the ground that you need to do like a standing jump over in order to not get thrown right the fuck away. That's okay. And if you get hit by them, you'll get knocked off the edge. That's also okay. That's absolutely fine. What's not okay is when someone on a completely different platform to you gets knocked off and they fly over to you, smack you in the side, send you flying off the edge. Meanwhile, they stop completely, have time to get up, jump up, and are able to continue on, while you get thrown right back to the checkpoint. It's so fucking dumb when that happens that I can't help but think to myself this game wasn't tested at all. Which I know is a lie, because there were, like, public beta tests. And no, actually, there weren't public betas. There were private beta tests of this game on both PC and PS4. But when that shit happens, I yelled at my fucking screen, because that wasn't fair. And there's a fair few situations like that where that happens too, where a bloody gigantic banana will jump down and donk someone just on the corner of the head. They won't fall over, but the banana will get redirected down to you. You'll get knocked over, only to immediately get knocked over again as you try to get up by two other apple things falling down and knocking you over again and again, meaning that you won't qualify for the round. Shit like that happens all the time. And one of the most frustrating things imaginable was when I was coming up on this corner on this one minigame that's like, this climb up where there's fluid constantly rising up from the bottom. Again, it's a concept that you could reappropriate for more courses, but they didn't. It only happens for just the one. But there's this corner that's so tiny that I couldn't even see the pixels of it that I got stuck on. And then I tried to jump, and it's like, oh, the corner's there now, and it threw me backwards off into the slime. There are just all sorts of physics problems like that, which just drove me mental. And again, I don't know if some of it's related to the lag or not, but it just seems really... It's either really poorly coded or really poorly optimized for ping outside of, like, my country. It's entirely possible that the server isn't actually being hosted in my country. It's being hosted somewhere else. And sometimes you think you see proof of that with the way that the crowds move around, and eventually the game just decides to throw someone off an edge entirely because they were just in the exact wrong spot when the crowd decided to just flip the fuck out. But either way, every time that happens to you, and it happens to me a lot, it just makes me frustrated. Combine that with the season pass and the consumables being refreshed on like a 12-hour system, locking me out of looking the way I want to look without having to come back every few hours. The overall lack of minigames and lack of variety in said minigames, because you'll end up eventually seeing at least one of the same set of 4 races every single time, one of the same set of survival minigames every time, and only 2 final minigames. Considering that I got to the end 3 times and I got to see both minigames within 30 minutes, it really does feel like there should have been more. Even if they just, like, reappropriated the team-based games so that they could be, you know, they could be used, but they just continuously get faster until someone eventually fucks up. But they didn't do that. And that Hex game as well is one of the most frustrating things for the physics as well, because sometimes the gaps between the hexes will trip you up. Just randomly. And you'll just fall right through. Or two of you will hit the hexes at the same time, but you'll both fall through, but you'll get sent flying because one of the hexes disappeared just slightly after the other, or just random shit like that. And that isn't even getting into how the actions of, like, 30 other people on the seesaw stage can affect how you'll have to do something. Like, you'll be standing there, you'll be going along, and some people will pick one way, some people will pick the other way, and that'll just result in you and other people having to wait a good, like, 30 seconds while everyone else goes to the thing for the seesaws to reset. Just shit like that, you know? Shit like that I can understand. But when you put it on top of the repetitive stages and the physics freaking out whenever they seemingly choose to or something like that, it just makes me not want to play it, man. It's not funny in the same way that MXC is. It's not creative in the same way that MXC is. And considering that they have to account for the fact that they've got like 59 other people going for the goal at the same time, they can't come up with any of like the really unique single player challenges like Sinkers and Floaters, or the one where you have to try and get through the maze that has the monsters, like the guys in plastic costumes running around it, trying to grab you and throw you off the edge. You could do those in this game. Except they ended up doing it with like that weird little one I talked about where the physics freak the fuck out and you're better off just waiting behind and letting everyone else take the fall and then just sweeping in and taking the win for yourself. That isn't particularly MXC. But then again, what do I know? I didn't make this game. I was legitimately looking forward to this. As soon as I saw like the first trailer on the, what's it called? I think it was on like the PC gaming show, but I could be wrong. But I'm pretty sure I saw like the announcement trailer for this and I was like, you know what? This looks awesome. Let's give it a try. But then I played it and it turned out to be kind of shite. It isn't helped out by the PC port. The controls are a bit weird. I don't know what the deal is with like the camera, for example. It's too oversensitive on the mouse. Some of the keyboard keys can react a little bit weirdly. It feels like the game was designed to be played on a controller. And on PC, the game's locked to 60 frames a second at all times, which kind of sucks. I can kind of understand why. It's probably a netcode problem, but yeah. Considering I've got a 240Hz monitor, it just feels kind of weird. It does run okay on PC, though, and they have said they're looking into adding crossplay, which they're probably going to need, because I imagine that the absolute casuals are going to get really bored of the 16 games they've got in here really quick, and then, yeah, it's just going to be the hardcore people who know what they're doing all the time. It isn't really helped out by the fact that there's an achievement that means you have to win 5 times in a row in order to actually get it, and therefore have all the achievements, which, considering that this game relies on not only having, like, retarded people that fail, but also having not retarded people when it turns out to be some of your teammates, and then just having really good luck on where all the other people decide to go on the stages that rely on physics, like the one with the beams that go left and right, the seesaws. Yeah, I don't see anyone, like, realistically being able to grab that one. Therefore, I'm done. I'm really disappointed. You know what the funny thing is? I have tried so many times to make, like, a game based off MXC or Takeshi's Castle, depending on whichever one you want to pick. But I've failed so many times just because it's so hard to translate those mechanics into a game form. Fall Guys comes close, but just kinda drops the ball. Hits the wrong stone. You know? Maybe I should try and pick that up again. Game Boy Studio 2.0 is coming out. I might be able to think of something for that. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.